Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, make it a point to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitter. Make sure you're especially on YouTube and Facebook that you hit that notification button. That way you'll be notified as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat as the program is taking place. Also, make sure you visit fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. It is the place to go to get all of your Pro 2A swag. I'm talking T-shirts, coffee mugs, hoodies, you name it, it is all there. Even stuff for the home or the office, or even so that you can go out and be safe in the COVID. But guess what? What's even better is every dollar that you spend goes right back into the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. So you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. All right, if there's one thing I know about our audience, it's this, is that, we tend to enjoy a good shit show, at least for a short period of time. And when I talk about that, especially in this context, I am quite sure that you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. That's right, the presidential debate. Folks, it was definitely a dumpster fire. For those of you who watched it, for those of you who didn't, I'm sure that if you've seen the highlights, then you've seen the lowlights as well. But there was one thing that was noticeably absent from the debates. Can you guess what that is? Yep, it was gun control. Gun control was absolutely not mentioned once during the first presidential debate, which, as far as I can think of, is one of the few times, especially when the two major parties come together, that it's not mentioned. I mean, let's just be honest, because normally gun control is the first thing that is brought up by whomever the Democratic candidate is, because, well, they have to show that they are anti-gun. And then usually that's rebuffed by the Republican candidate, whoever that is. And their attitude is, well, I have to show that I support the Second Amendment, even if, they really don't. But they still got to show that, at least say the perfunctory I support the Second Amendment thingy, before they go and ban bump stocks. But I digress. But I think it's important to understand the full context of why there was no mention of the Second Amendment or no mention of gun control or the taking away of the Second Amendment in this particular debate. I think, first of all, you have to understand that, because things are still going on in Chicago. And by the way, I just want you to know, while it wasn't talked about on the surface, it was talked about a little bit underneath, because you still have places like Chicago. You have places like New York. You have places like, Sacramento, California. You still have major violence increasing in cities across the country. Now, mind you, this was since the beginning of the year. There's been a major spike in particular in the first quarter and the first half of this year. There was a major spike in violent crime, in particular in major cities across the United States. Now, it's mostly happened in areas that are controlled by Democrats, but there are some cities like Tulsa where there has been an increase in violence, even in cities that are controlled by Republicans. So this is a nonpartisan thing, is what I'm trying to tell you. But what we note is that in areas where there tends to be restrictions on the right to keep and bear arms for law-abiding citizens, those spikes in violence tended to increase even more, right? So we've already seen the increase in violence. And by the way, interestingly enough, this really kind of coincides with the whole decriminalizing crime thing, letting people out of jail who've been in jail for violent crime, who are violent criminals who've been in jail. Some of them for violent crimes. Some of them were involved in violent crimes before, but because the last crime they were involved in wasn't considered violent, they're not considered violent. So they, let's let them out on the streets, and let's make it so that also, by the way, we're not going to actually arrest people anymore for committing crimes. You steal something up to $950, for example, in California, you get a ticket. Here, show up to court. Anyway, so that's already been an issue. The whole decriminalizing crime thing was already a thing, and people were feeling a little bit of unrest about that. Okay. If you guys remember back, let's think back to the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. If you remember, right after that shooting, you remember that all of as is usually the case whenever there is a mass casualty event involving firearms, the media is all in an uproar. The politicians are all in an uproar. They're all dancing over the dead bodies of the victims of these particular events and tragedies, and they're all talking, and they all start talking about gun control. That, by the way, would have done absolutely nothing to keep that event from happening. But hey, why let a good tragedy go to waste? But you remember that that was when you had David Hogg and you had the March for Our Lives and all of these folks and all of these celebrities who make money promoting guns in Hollywood all come out and they're all like, we need to ban guns because, well, they're scary. But when you guys remember that stuff came out and it was pushed and it was pushed and it was pushed and it was pushed, right? So why is it then when things are going on here, why is it in this particular case, why isn't it not continuing? Well, there was the COVID. See, one of the first things that happened when COVID hit was we saw hoarding. And anyone who's ever gone to any prepper website or anything like that, they're gonna give you a list of the stuff that is likely going to be needed and in short supply. Should there be something like the zombie apocalypse or any sort of a culture changing event that is going to make things kind of difficult to consume, to find things here in society. And right under toilet paper, you're going to find firearms. That's right, because one of the first things that happened when they put the nation on the lockdown, one of the first things that happened was the shelves went empty of first toilet paper and then ammo and then guns, and you couldn't find a firearm. In fact, in California, there were lines. Even in California, by the way, just so you guys know, even in California, there were lines to be able to go and to be able to purchase firearms. Gun stores were being sold out of all sorts of everything that they had. And the worst part about it was that because many manufacturers shut down, it wasn't like there was going to be a new supply coming. Or even if the manufacturers weren't shutting down, a lot of their material suppliers were shutting down. But mind you to say that millions, tens of millions of people who never owned firearms before went out to purchase firearms. And many of them did so in areas where, well, the Second Amendment isn't exactly respected by the government, like New York, like California, also in some swing states. And what people all of a sudden found out was that these laws that were being put in place, that they were being told were going to keep them safe and were only a mild or moderate inconvenience, all of a sudden was infringing on their fundamental right to keep and bear arms. What they saw was, look, dude, there's a disease out there, and there's shortages out there. And if I don't have the ability it does no good for me to go and buy groceries and buy food and buy toilet paper if I don't have the ability to defend them when someone comes to take them. Right? All of a sudden, survival instinct kicks in, and to hell with gun control. Except that now that gun control that they had ignored before was all of a sudden infringing on their fundamental right to keep and bear arms. Their fundamental human right of self-defense. Right? But wait, there's more. Because then we had the George Floyd incident. We had the incident where George Floyd died at the hands of officers, where one officer had his knee on the back of George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and would eventually die. Now, I'm not debating. I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying it happened. All right. I'm not saying the officer killed him. It looks really, really bad, but let's just be real. This set off it set off a huge chain of events, which resulted in not just thousands of nonviolent protests throughout the country, but also hundreds, And when I say hundreds, I mean I'm talking almost 700 different violent riots, looting throughout the country, where you had individuals and business owners, lives were at risk, livelihoods were at risk, businesses were at risk, were being destroyed by individuals whose sole goal is to destroy, is to tear down our fundamental system of government, right? People wanted to be able to defend themselves from that, and guess what that did? Well, that made things even worse. That sent even more people to the gun store. Except this time they went there and, well, there wasn't a whole lot for them to get. There was hardly anything there. Here it was, they're thinking this is months later, months after COVID first started, and they're thinking, gosh, I'm sure they're restocked by now, but they're not. They're not because so many things are shut down. They're not because, well, it's just, they're, once again, both ammo and firearms are just difficult to find anywhere. So understand that people are a lot more sensitive to the infringement on their fundamental rights. It's very much like people take advantage of the right to, the right to redress, to address their government, right? To go and speak with their legislators or their legislative representatives or their city council members. Imagine if all of a sudden they decided to go and do it and they could never get a hold of anybody. See, it wasn't an infringement when they decided not to exercise their right. But now that they want to exercise it, they recognize and they see the infringement. And that is, in fact, what we're dealing with these days. Now, keep in mind, just because it wasn't discussed in the debate does not mean that gun control is gone. It doesn't mean that gun control is not on the table. It doesn't mean that it's far off stage. We still have at least one presidential candidate who's made it clear he wants to ban multiple different types of firearms, including 9mm pistols. We cannot ignore the fact that we have a vice presidential candidate who was the queen of gun control in California, who had a department that specifically was assigned to go and seize people's firearms, who has said that after the first 100 days, she's gave Congress 100 days before she instituted via executive order restrictions on the fundamental right to keep and bear arms. Keep in mind, on the other side, we have a candidate who, while he espouses the support for the Second Amendment, well, he's had a few moments that have caused us to wonder, like the ban on bump stocks, like his position on silencers and the whole, take the guns first, due process later. So keep in mind, it's not far from the discussion. I mean, it's not just because it's not in the discussion does not mean that it is not on people's minds. Because, see, in particular, one of these individuals is counting on you and I to help them to win this election. And, well, let's just put it this way. We are in an opportunity where we actually do, at this point, have people like folks from the Second Amendment Foundation and other folks who are willing to be there, who are there kind of in this candidate's ear, talking to them about where we stand and why it's important that they support the Second Amendment. Now, folks, once again, Firearms Policy Coalition does not endorse candidates. We do not support candidates. We tell you where they stand. We tell you who's around them. We tell you what they've done, right? And then we let you decide. But I just wanted to make sure that you recognized what I recognized, was that, one, gun control was not a part of this first debate. Number two, gun control is still part of the debate. The Second Amendment is still a part of the debate. It's a significant part of the debate. And don't let its quiet absence fool you into believing that your gun rights are safe with either one. They may be better with one than the other, but just understand that just because folks aren't talking about it doesn't mean that there's not something going on. That sound kind of paranoid now. Just because I think they're out to, just because they're, what's that saying? Just because I believe they're out to get me doesn't mean they aren't. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing the program and telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.